I've been ranching in the high plains of eastern Colorado for 31 years, and in that time I have seen a great many things that I thought I understood and later discovered I had understood incorrectly. The weather, the cattle market, the way a hard winter follows a mild one with a regularity that ought to teach a man humility about his predictions, the way grief works in a man who does not know how to talk about it. That last one I got most wrong of all, and the correction came from watching my neighbor Drum Calloway and the woman his sister sent him in the spring of 1881, who arrived at Broken Bow Ranch with 2 leather trunks and a manner that I initially mistook for hardness and later understood was simply accuracy. My name is Prentice Hale. I run the Hale operation, 600 acres of buffalo grass and creek bottom, about 2 miles east of Broken Bow's north fence line. I have known Drum Calloway since we were both young men trying to convince the eastern Colorado high plains that they owed us a living, which they did not and do not, but which they will provide if asked correctly and with sufficient persistence. We have been neighbors for 23 years. I thought I knew him as well as one man knows another. I was wrong about that too, as it turned out, but I am getting ahead of myself. Drum Calloway came to the Broken Bow country in 1858, the same year I did, and we built our operations alongside each other in the way that neighboring frontier ranches build, sharing fence line work, sharing the occasional roundup crew, trading information about water and grass and where the market was moving. He was a capable man, deliberate and careful, with the kind of patience for cattle work that comes from genuine interest in the animals rather than just in their market value. He ran a clean, honest operation, and he was a fair neighbor, and I respected him the way you respect a man who does his work correctly and keeps his word. In 1872, he married a woman named Clara, who had come west from Illinois to teach school in Sutter Wells, and who was the kind of person that a community organizes itself around without quite deciding to, steady, clear-eyed, capable of both warmth and firmness, in exactly the proportions the situation required. She ran the Broken Bow household with the same quality she brought to everything, and she and Drum built the kind of marriage that looks from the outside like simple contentment, and is, I think, considerably more difficult and more deliberate than that. They had no children, which I know was a grief to both of them, though neither spoke of it directly. They had each other and they had the ranch, and they had a life that was full in the specific way of 2 people who have decided that what they have is what matters. Clara died in the winter of 1879, of a fever that came on in November and was over by December, fast and complete, and without the warning that might have allowed a man to prepare. Drum was with her at the end. I know because I rode over when I heard she was bad, and I sat with them through the last 2 days, and what I witnessed was the specific quality of grief that comes when the thing you built your life around is suddenly not there. I have been married to my wife Edna for 26 years, and I did not fully understand what I was watching in Drum Calloway's face in December of 1879 until much later, which tells you something about the limits of even genuine sympathy. He kept the ranch going through the winter of 1879 and into 1880, which was the minimum and was a considerable achievement under the circumstances. But keeping going and running well are different things, and by the spring of 1880 Broken Bow was showing the specific kind of neglect that comes not from laziness, but from the absence of the reason to care. The south fence had 3 bad sections that Drum would have fixed in an afternoon in any prior year. The account books, which Clara had kept with meticulous precision, had gone unrecorded since November. The house, which Clara had kept clean and ordered, was clean in the way of a man who knows cleanliness matters but cannot quite remember why. I rode over several times that spring. Drum was always there, always working, feeding the cattle, moving them to grass, doing the daily minimum. He would offer coffee and we would sit and talk about cattle prices and weather and the Sutter Wells Road situation, and the conversation was the same as it had always been in its surface and completely different underneath, because Drum was not inside the conversation the way he used to be. He was present, and he was absent simultaneously, which is a condition I now understand better than I did then. His sister, a woman named Agnes Foyle who lived in Denver, and who had her brother's particular quality of seeing things clearly and saying so, came for a visit in the fall of 1880. She spent a week at Broken Bow and rode over to see me on her last day before the stage back to Denver, and she sat in my kitchen with Edna and me and said, without preamble, "He needs someone in that house." "He'll find his footing," I said, which was what I had been saying for a year. Agnes looked at me with the patience of a woman who has heard this before. "He hasn't found it in 12 months, she said, "and he won't find it alone. He needs someone to run alongside him, a practical arrangement, someone who knows what they're getting into and comes with clear eyes." I looked at Edna. Edna had been saying the same thing to me privately for 6 months, and had the good manners not to say so aloud now. "He won't agree to it," I said. "He doesn't have to agree to it yet," Agnes said. "He has to agree to meet her. The agreeing to it comes after." She was right, as it turned out. It usually comes after with Drum. He is a man who needs to see a thing before he can decide about it. Agnes went back to Denver and wrote letters, because Agnes Foyle was the kind of woman who wrote letters to purpose and got answers back. By March of 1881 she had found her candidate, a widow from the Dakota Territory named Vera Combe, 40 years old, who had run her late husband's homestead alone for 3 years after he died of a bad fall from a roof he should not have been fixing in November. The homestead had been sold the previous fall at a price that left her solvent but not comfortable, and she was, Agnes said, looking for a practical arrangement on a going ranch operation where her skills would be useful, and where the land was better than what she had left. Drum agreed to meet her. I know because Agnes wrote to tell me, with the brevity of a woman who had expected this outcome. He said yes. She arrives April 14th. I rode over the morning of April 14th on a pretext about a fence line question that could have waited a week. The truth was that I wanted to see what happened when the stage from Sutter Wells came in, and I am not proud of this, but I am reporting it honestly. The stage came at 2 in the afternoon. Drum had cleaned the house, which I noticed because it was cleaner than it had been in a year, and he had put on a decent shirt and his good hat, which I also noticed because these were the actions of a man who cared about an impression, even while telling himself he did not. He was standing on the porch when the stage came around the bend in the ranch road, and his posture was the posture of a man who has agreed to something, and is not yet sure he agrees to it. The stage stopped. The driver handed down 2 leather trunks of good quality, not new, but well-maintained, which told you something. Then Vera Combe stepped down. She was a medium-height woman with dark hair going to gray at the temples, wearing a practical traveling dress of dark wool and boots that had seen real use. She had the kind of face that becomes more rather than less interesting the longer you look at it. Not a pretty face in the conventional sense, but a face with structure and expression, with gray eyes that moved over the Broken Bow yard and the house and Drum on the porch with the same methodical attention that an experienced rancher gives to a piece of land they are considering. She looked at everything before she looked at him. I have always thought that was the right order. Then she looked at Drum, and she walked to the porch, and she put out her hand. "Mr. Calloway," she said, "Vera Combe, you've got a south fence that needs work." She had seen it from the stage road. Drum looked at her hand, then at her, and then he shook the hand. "I know," he said. "Good," she said. "Where do you want the trunks?" That was the introduction. I have told this story to Edna many times, and she always says the same thing, that she knew from that moment how it was going to go. I was slower. I thought it was going to be a practical arrangement that stayed practical, which tells you what I understood about practical arrangements and the women who make them. Vera Combe moved into the Broken Bow house in the east bedroom, which had been the spare room since Clara's time, and she married Drum Calloway at the Sutter Wells courthouse on April 17th, 3 days after she arrived, in a ceremony that took 12 minutes and had me and Edna as witnesses, and the county clerk as officiant. It was the most businesslike wedding I have attended, including 2 cattle auctions that had more ceremony. Drum shook her hand after the clerk was done. Vera looked at his hand and then at him with an expression that was not quite amusement and not quite assessment, and then she took the hand and held it for a moment. "All right," she said. "Let's go look at those accounts." They went back to Broken Bow and looked at the accounts. I rode home and told Edna what had happened, and Edna said, "That woman is going to be exactly what he needs." I said I wasn't sure, and Edna gave me the look she gives me when she is waiting for me to catch up, which I have been receiving for 26 years, and which I have learned to take seriously even when I don't yet understand why. The first month at Broken Bow was, by all accounts I could gather, and I gathered them through my natural position as Drum's nearest neighbor and through Edna's conversations with Vera, which began the second week, and which Vera engaged in with the direct brevity that characterized everything she did. A month of systematic assessment and systematic correction. Vera went through the account books in the first week and reconstructed the unrecorded months from the receipts and tallies she found in the desk drawer where Drum had been putting papers rather than recording them. She did not comment on the state of the books except to ask Drum specific questions when she needed information she couldn't reconstruct. He answered them. She recorded them. By the end of the first week, the accounts were current. The south fence she assessed on the third day, riding the full line with Drum, and she told him which sections needed immediate work and which could wait until fall and what materials she would need from Sutter Wells. He listened. He ordered the materials. They fixed the fence together the following week, which was the first fence work Drum had done in 14 months. I know about the fence work because I could see them from my north pasture, 2 figures working the line in the April cold, methodical and unhurried. I watched for longer than I needed to and then went back to my own work, which was the right thing to do. The kitchen Vera reorganized in the second week. Not dramatically. She did not discard anything of Clara's or move things without purpose, but she understood a working kitchen the way she understood everything, which was as a system that either functioned or didn't, and she adjusted what didn't function until it did. She cooked real meals, which Drum had not been doing, not out of incapacity, but out of the specific failure of motivation that comes when cooking for one feels like the wrong number. Edna told me after her second conversation with Vera that Vera had said something interesting. She had said, "The ranch is easier than I expected. The man is harder." I asked Edna what she meant. "She means," Edna said, with the patience she reserves for when I am being slow, that the ranch has practical problems with practical solutions, and the man has a grief problem that doesn't, and she's working on both. "She's only been here 2 weeks, I said. "She's a practical woman," Edna said. 2 weeks is enough to see what's there. Drum came over to my place in the third week, which he had not done for months, and we sat on my porch and he drank coffee and we talked. The conversation was different from the ones we had been having for a year, not in subject, which was still cattle and weather and the Sutter Wells Road, but in quality. He was inside the conversation. Not fully, not the way he had been before Clara died, but present in a way he had not been. I said carefully, "How are things at the Broken Bow?" He looked at his coffee. "Better," he said. "She's capable," I said. "She's more than capable," he said. There was something in his voice that I noted and did not comment on, because Drum Calloway is a man who says a thing when he is ready to say it and not before, and pushing is not useful. "What does she think of the operation?" I said. "She thinks the cattle rotation is wrong," he said. "She's right. I've been moving them the same way for years because it was the way Clara and I worked it out, and Clara understood the grass, and I kept doing it the same way after she was gone because," he stopped, "because I didn't think about whether it was still right, just did it the way we'd always done it." This was the most he had said about Clara since the funeral. I kept my face still. Vera thinks we should shift the south herd to the creek bottom pasture in May instead of June, he said. She read the grass right. I walked it with her and she was right. She knows cattle, I said. She knows cattle, he said. And she knows grass and she knows accounts and she fixes what's broken without making a production of it. He paused. She fixed the pump on the east well yesterday. I've been hauling water to the east trough for 6 months because the pump was wrong and I kept meaning to get to it. She fixed it herself, I said. She asked me where the tools were and fixed it herself, he said. Took her 40 minutes. I thought about this. Drum, I said, how are you? How is the arrangement? How are the two of you? He looked at me with the dry patience of a man who knows what his neighbor is trying to ask. We're fine, Prentice, he said. It's a practical arrangement and it's working practically. That's what it is. Yes, I said. I rode home and told Edna. She said, he doesn't know yet what it is. He just said it's a practical arrangement, I said. Yes, Edna said, that's what I mean. May came in cold and the grass came up late, which is the high plains way. It never does what you think it will do in the time you think it will do it. I was busy with my own spring work and saw less of the broken bow situation than I had in April, but I saw enough. Vera was at the Sutter Wells store when I came in for supplies in the second week of May. She was examining harness leather with the attention of someone who knows exactly what to look for. She found what she was looking for and set it aside and turned to find me standing nearby. Mr. Hale, she said. Mrs. Calloway, I said, which was the first time I had used the name and which seemed to land without particular weight on her, because she had chosen it practically and wore it practically. How's the grass on your east section? She said. Drum says yours comes up earlier than ours because of the slope. About a week, I said. Maybe 10 days this year it came up slow. She nodded and made a mental note of something. We're moving the south herd to the creek bottom next week, she said. The grass is ready. He told me you'd suggested that, I said. I suggested it based on the grass, she said. He knew the grass was right when he walked it. He just needed someone to say so. I looked at her for a moment. He's doing better, I said. She was quiet for a moment. He's a good man who lost the thing that made the work make sense, she said. It takes time to find a new reason, or to remember the reason was always there. It was just connected to one particular person for so long that he couldn't see it apart from her. I had not expected this precision of observation from a conversation in a hardware store. You've thought about it, I said. I think about what's in front of me, she said. He's in front of me. She picked up the harness leather. Will you excuse me, Mr. Hale? I need to get back. I stood in the Sutter Wells store for a moment after she left, feeling that I had just been given a very clear look at something I had not been seeing clearly. The cattle rotation change paid by June. The south herd on the creek bottom pasture came into the summer in better condition than the broken bow cattle had been in 3 years. I saw this because I rode the fence line with Drum in the second week of June, and the condition of the animals was visible. She was right, Drum said, looking at them. She usually is, I said. He glanced at me. You're keeping track, he said. I'm your neighbor, I said. I notice things. He was quiet for a moment. We were at the creek bottom fence, the herd moving slowly through the long grass in the June afternoon, the light coming off the water the way it does in the early summer, clean and particular, the kind of light that makes the high plains look like they meant to be beautiful. Prentice, Drum said. Yes, I said. She found Clara's recipe book, he said, in the kitchen. Clara had it in the back of the lower shelf and I hadn't moved it. Vera found it when she was reorganizing the lower shelves. She asked me about it. I waited. She didn't make anything of it, he said. She just asked if it was something I wanted to keep accessible or put somewhere else. That's all. And I said accessible, and she put it back where it was on the lower shelf. He stopped. She didn't make anything of it, he said again, as if this were the important thing. No, I said, I imagined she wouldn't. It was the right thing to do, he said. Neither the one thing nor the other, just accessible. That's Vera, I said. He looked at me again. Yes, he said, and looked back at the cattle, and we stood there in the June light for a while. Edna had Vera over for supper in July, which was the first time we had done so formally, and I understood by the end of the evening that Edna and Vera had formed the kind of friendship that women of similar quality form. Not warm in the performed sense, but warm in the specific sense of mutual recognition and respect. They talked about cattle and grass and accounts and the Sutter Wells school situation, and they disagreed about 2 things and agreed about 6, and Vera drank 2 cups of Edna's coffee and complimented them directly, without the social elaboration that some people use to fill the space around a simple, honest statement. After Vera rode home, she rode well, with the economy of a woman who had been doing it all her life. Edna sat across the table from me and said, "She loves him." "She barely knows him," I said. "She's known him since April," Edna said. "That's 4 months. 4 months of daily work alongside a person is more knowing than most people manage in 4 years of polite acquaintance." She looked at me. "She loves him. She hasn't told him yet because she is waiting for him to be ready to hear it." "And is he ready?" I said. "He's getting there," Edna said. "He's been getting there since May. He just doesn't know what he's getting to yet." I thought about the recipe book on the lower shelf. "How does she feel about Clara?" I said. Edna was quiet for a moment. "She respects her," she said. "She said Drum talks about her sometimes in the evenings, just mentions her, the way you mention someone who was part of the fabric of a thing. And Vera listens and doesn't try to place herself instead of Clara and doesn't try to compete. She just lets Clara be part of the history of the place, which she is." "That's a considerable thing," I said. "It is," Edna said. "It takes a woman who is completely sure of herself to do that, to let the history be the history without making it a threat." I thought about this for a long time that night. August was hot the way August on the high plains is hot, a relentless, windless heat that comes off the prairie in waves and makes every task take longer than it should. I saw Drum and Vera several times that month, at the Sutter Wells store, and once when I rode over to look at a shared fence line section that had gone wrong in the summer dry. And what I saw was a change that I found difficult to name precisely, but that was unmistakable. They worked together differently than they had in April. Not the difference of 2 people who have grown accustomed to each other's presence, though that was part of it. The difference of 2 people who have become, in some way that neither has named, necessary to each other. Drum handed Vera a tool without being asked, and she took it without comment because she had been about to ask for it. Vera pointed at a section of fence that needed attention, and Drum was already walking toward it. These are small things, and they are not small things. I mentioned this to Edna. "Yes," she said, "I know." "Has she said anything?" I said. "She said that the ranch is the best it's been since she arrived," Edna said, "and that Drum fixed the roof on the equipment barn last week without her suggesting it." I sat with this. The equipment barn roof had been needing work since the previous fall. In the old days before Clara died, Drum would have had it done before the snow. Doing it in August, unasked, was a return to the man he had been, or a version of that man, the version that includes what the last 2 years had been. "She's pleased about the roof," I said. "She told me," Edna said, "that when she came downstairs that morning and he was already up on the roof with the materials, she stood in the yard for a moment and she said she had to go back inside for a minute." I looked at Edna. "She didn't use the word," Edna said. "Vera doesn't use words like that easily, but I know what she meant." "Yes," I said. "So do I." September brought the fall gather, which is the busiest time in the ranching calendar, and the time when the quality of an operations management over the prior year becomes visible in the condition of the animals and the efficiency of the work. I had my own gather to manage and Drum had his, but the operations are close enough that we share crew for parts of it, as we have for years. I rode over to Broken Bow on the third morning of the gather to check on a shared section of the south pasture. Vera was at the corral, working alongside the hired hands, not managing from the side but working, in the practical way she did everything, with the direct efficiency that I had come to recognize as simply her character. The men respected her. I could see this in the way they worked with her rather than around her, which is a distinction that matters in cattle work. Drum was at the far end of the corral. He caught my eye and came over. "Good gather so far," he said. "Looks it," I said. The cattle were in excellent condition, the best I had seen from Broken Bow in 3 years. "Her idea to push the north herd to the upper pasture in August," he said. "They came in heavier than I've seen them." "She has good instincts," I said. "She has good knowledge," he said, "not instinct. She worked cattle her whole marriage and she paid attention the whole time and she kept what she learned." He paused. "She's not running on instinct. She's running on 20 years of careful work." I looked at him. There was something in the way he said this. Not admiration exactly, but the thing that is adjacent to admiration when the person admiring has also developed their own 20 years of careful work and knows what it means. "Drum," I said. "Don't," he said without sharpness. "I wasn't going to say anything," I said. "Yes, you were," he said. "And you're right and I know it. I need a little more time." "Take all you need," I said. He looked at Vera across the corral. She was talking to one of the hands about something, pointing at a steer, making a specific observation. The hand nodded and went to deal with it. She turned back to the work. "She never makes me feel like I failed," Drum said. "When she fixes something, and she fixes things, Prentice, things I should have fixed and didn't, she never makes me feel like the not fixing was a failure. She just fixes it and moves to the next thing." He stopped. "Clara used to do that too, different way, but the same quality." He had not compared the two of them directly before to me. I stayed very still. "I'm not saying it's the same thing," he said quickly. "It's not the same thing. I don't know what it is yet. I'm trying to figure out what it is." "Take the time," I said again, and went to look at the south pasture. October came in cool and clear, the high plains in their best mood, the grass going golden and the sky the deep blue that only happens in the fall, when the summer's weight has lifted and the winter hasn't yet arrived. The Broken Bow gather was in and tallied, and the numbers were the best since 2018. I mean 1878, the last full year Clara was alive. I came over on a Tuesday in the middle of October to return a post-hole digger Drum had lent me in the spring. I tied my horse at the fence and walked to the porch and heard, through the open kitchen window, the sound of an ordinary conversation. Not an important conversation, not a declaration or a reckoning. Just two people in a kitchen talking about what needed doing the next day, something about the north fence and the supply order, and whether the winter feed stock was going to be sufficient. An entirely ordinary conversation about an entirely ordinary set of ranch concerns, conducted in the easy, slightly shorthand way of two people who have been talking about the same things for long enough that they don't need all the words. I stood on the porch for a moment and listened to the conversation and understood what Edna had been telling me for months. I knocked on the door. Drum opened it. "Prentice," he said, "come in." Vera was at the kitchen table with the account ledger, which she kept current now without any drama or reminder, just as a thing that needed doing and got done. She looked up and said, "Mr. Hale, coffee." "Thank you," I said. She poured it and went back to the ledger. Drum and I talked about the fence and the winter preparation and the cattle market, and all the while the ordinary sound of the ranch's working life went on around us. Vera making a note in the ledger, the fire doing its work in the stove, the wind off the high plains moving against the windows. When I left, Drum walked me to the fence. He was quiet for a moment. "Prentice," he said. "Yes," I said. He looked at the house. The kitchen window was lit from inside, warm against the October dusk. "I've been thinking," he said, "about what I said in September, about needing time to figure out what it is." "Yes," I said. "I think I've figured it out," he said. I waited. "I think what it is," he said carefully, the way Drum says things when he is being very precise because the thing matters, is that she came here for a practical arrangement and so did I, and what's happened is that the practical arrangement became something I don't want to be without. He paused. "I don't know if she—" "Drum," I said. "What?" he said. "She knows," I said. "She's known since about June. She's been waiting for you." He looked at me. "You and Edna have been talking," he said. "We have been talking," I said. "We've been watching, too. You're not subtle when you're figuring something out." He was quiet for a moment. Did Vera say something to Edna?" "She said," I told him, "that the ranch is the best it's been since she arrived and that you fixed the equipment barn roof in August without being asked." He turned this over. "That's all she said." "That's what she said to Edna," I said. "What she said to herself is her own business, but Edna knows what she meant." He looked at the kitchen window again. The light was warm and particular in the October dusk, and through the glass you could see the shadow of Vera at the table with the ledger, the movement of her pen, the straightness of her posture that was not stiffness but the specific uprightness of a person who is exactly where they have decided to be. "I should go in," he said. "Yes," I said, "you should." He went in. I rode home. Edna was waiting up, which she does when she knows something is happening that I have been sent to witness the edge of. I told her what Drum had said, and what I had said back, and that he had gone inside. She was quiet for a moment. "Good," she said. "You think it went all right?" I said. "I think," Edna said, "that Vera Combe has been a practical woman her entire life, and that she came to Broken Bow for practical reasons, and that what she found there turned out to be more than practical, and that she is the kind of woman who, when a man finally tells her something true, will receive it exactly as it deserves to be received." She paused. "Without drama and without sentimentality, and with complete honesty about what she feels in return." "And what does she feel in return?" I said. Edna looked at me with the patience of 26 years. "What do you think she feels?" she said. I thought about Vera at the hardware store in May, talking about a man who had lost the thing that made the work make sense. I thought about her standing in the yard when Drum was on the equipment barn roof. I thought about the recipe book on the lower shelf, neither the one thing nor the other, just accessible, and the ledger current every month, and the cattle in the creek bottom pasture in better condition than they'd been in 3 years. "I think she loves him," I said. "Yes," Edna said. "She does." I did not see Drum alone until the following week, when he came over to my place on a Wednesday morning with the post-hole digger he had borrowed from me 2 weeks prior. I had returned it, and he had borrowed it again for a fence section that needed work, which is the natural rhythm of neighboring ranches. He set the digger against my barn wall and looked at me. "Well," I said. "Well," he said. He looked like a man who has slept properly for the first time in a while, not transformed. Drum Calloway is not a man who transforms. He is a man who returns slowly to himself. "We talked," he said. "And?" I said. "She said—" He stopped. He was quiet for a moment in the way of a man choosing words for something he does not usually put into words. "She said that she came to Broken Bow for land and stability and a going operation, and that all 3 of those things were here, and that she had not expected anything else to be here as well, and that what was here in addition to those things was, she said." He stopped again. "What did she say?" I said. "She said it was considerably more than she had arranged for," he said, "and that she was not going to pretend otherwise." I looked at him. I told her the same, he said, more or less in fewer words. What did she say to that? I said. She said, good, he said. And then she said the winter feed order needed to go in this week, and did I want to ride to Sutter Wells together or separately? I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed about anything connected to Drum Calloway in 2 years, and it felt right. She's something, I said. She is, he said. There was a warmth in his voice that had not been there in 2 years, not the warmth of a man who has forgotten what came before, but the warmth of a man who has found that the world still contains it, which is a different and harder thing. Clara would have liked her, I said. I don't know why I said it, it seemed true. Drum was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said, she'd have liked the directness and the accounts. He almost smiled. Clara always said the accounts were the true measure of a person. Vera's accounts are immaculate, I said. They are, he said, I've checked. He picked up the post-hole digger. I need to get back. We're riding to Sutter Wells this afternoon. Together or separately, I said. Together, he said, and he went. I have one more thing to tell, and then I will stop, because the story has its ending, and I do not want to add to it for the sake of adding. In the spring of 1882, 6 months after the October conversation, Drum Calloway came over to my place on a Saturday morning and asked me and Edna if we would come to Broken Bow for supper that evening, because he and Vera wanted to tell us something. We came. Vera had cooked a good meal, a proper supper, the kind that takes time and intention, and we sat at the Broken Bow kitchen table, and she and Drum told us, in the plain, factual manner that was both of theirs, that they were expecting a child in September. I looked at Drum. He was sitting at the head of Thomas, at the head of the Broken Bow table, at the head of his own table, and he had the look of a man who is fully present in the room he is sitting in, which is a condition I had not seen in him in 3 years. Vera watched me register this. She had the same look she had always had, clear-eyed and direct and entirely without performance, but there was something additional in it, not softness exactly. The word I settled on later was ease. She was at ease in a way that she had not quite been when she arrived with her 2 trunks in April of the prior year, and I understood that the ease was not complacency, but the specific quality of a woman who has arrived where she intended to be, which is a different and better thing. Congratulations, Edna said, with the warmth she does not use often and means completely. Thank you, Vera said. She looked at Drum. He looked at her. It was not a long look, just a moment's direct exchange between 2 people who have done their honest accounting of each other and arrived at the same number. Then they looked back at us and the supper continued. I rode home that night in the spring of 1882, with the high plains dark around me, and the stars doing what stars do on the Colorado high plains, which is to make a man feel the appropriate size relative to the world, and I thought about what I had been wrong about since the beginning. I had been wrong about the practical arrangement. I had thought practical meant temporary, or limited, or the kind of thing that substitutes for the real thing. What I had watched over the prior year was the opposite. Practical, in Vera Combs' understanding of it, meant honest. It meant seeing what was there and saying so. It meant fixing what was broken without making a production of fixing it. It meant keeping the accounts current and the ledger straight and the cattle on the right pasture and the recipe book accessible on the lower shelf. And it meant, apparently, being exactly what a grieving man needed without either of them having planned it that way. Drum Calloway is not a different man than he was before Clara died. He is the same man with additional history, which is what grief does to a person if they are given the time and the right conditions to get through it. Vera gave him both the time, by not hurrying him, and the conditions, by making the Broken Bow a going concern again, so that the work could do what work does for a capable man, which is to give him a reason and a structure and a place to put his energy. And in return she got what she said she came for, land, stability, a going operation, and considerably more than she had arranged for. The child was born in September of 1882. A girl, which they told us at the time and which I now know, 10 years later became 2 girls and then a boy, and all 3 of them have their father's patience and their mother's directness, which is as good a combination as I can imagine. Broken Bow Ranch is the best operation in this part of the Colorado High Plains. It has been for 9 years. The accounts are immaculate. The cattle are in excellent condition. The south fence is solid. The equipment barn roof has not leaked once. And every time I ride over and come into the kitchen for coffee, which I do about once a week, because Drum and I have been neighbors for 30 years and some habits are right, I see the Broken Bow kitchen ledger on the table, current to the day, in Vera's neat hand. And beside it, on the lower shelf where it has always been, Clara's recipe book. The practical arrangement turned out to be the realest thing I ever watched 2 people build. I should have seen it coming from the moment she stepped off that stage and told him his south fence needed work before she'd said hello. I know better now.